What's good in the hood YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video on Kamen Rider Geo episode 4. This episode is called No Continue 2016 and the episode was pretty good. The way the episode started was it continued where the previous episode ended, where Ex-Aid was attacking Gaze and Sogo. And what happens is that he transforms into Ex-Aid and begins to fight them. But then what happens is that we end up seeing that time freezes at one point because of Hora, and Hora ends up turning another Ex-Aid back into another Ex-Aid instead of its human form. And what happens is that at this point the M loses all memory of being Ex-Aid, and they realize that clearly there's a connection between between when the another riders exist and when the regular riders exist, because in the present time when the another rider exists, what happens is that rider can't exist as well, so that creates a situation, as opposed to if it's of their own era for some reason, they can exist, but they can only exist for so long, which is something that's worth noting. So that does end up happening, and what does end up occurring is that the other Ex-Aid runs off eventually, so that's worth noting. What does end up happening is that M doesn't want them to continue fighting and getting involved in all this, so that is something that's worth noting. He doesn't really trust them immediately. And then what happens is that Gaze decides to go off to the year 2016 to try to talk to M as well as Hiro about the situation in the future, and trying to convince them to help out. And the thing is that Hiro doesn't really believe all the future talk, but M is more intrigued and more willing to accept the idea behind this, so that's something that's actually worth noting. What does end up happening is that we end up seeing them talking to each other a bunch, and we also see that there is a fight scene that occurs where we actually see Ex-Aid and Brave in combat, which is cool to actually see Brave being used in the show. Sure, he doesn't fight alongside Ex-Aid and Geo and Gaze at all, but at least seeing Brave suited up is still a very nice touch, and I was grateful to at least see that, because that does imply that there is a better chance that secondary riders will be showing up more often. Does that mean in general we'll be seeing secondary riders? Hard to say for sure, but it definitely looks like a possibility that could be happening. So that's good, at least. What does end up happening though is that Geo and Tsukiyomi end up discussing things. Sogo and Tsukiyomi discuss things, because the thing is that Gaze runs off. He's not really in the best of moods regarding Sogo, because of the fact that because of what he actually had said to him in the past. Because the thing is that he had said something about not understanding dealing with people, like saving people's lives and having to deal with hard situations or whatever, and yet at the same time Gaze can only, he is the most he's the one person that can understand it better than anyone, because him and Tsukiyomi both lost several friends that ended up fighting Oma Geo, and so when he of all people says that basically is like the worst thing to say to him, especially when it comes from Sogo, just because of who he is and his connection to those that he lost. So yeah, he basically was completely ruining any respect he was getting from Gaze by saying that. So that's something that's worth noting. What does end up happening is that we do end up seeing that Gaze ends up fighting another Ex-Aid in the past. Well, I forgot to mention that. We do see the whole clip that happened in the previous episode where they showcased like Hora being introduced and her giving the father of the kid the another Ex-Aid form. But in this case, we actually learned about what the good and the bad news really was, which is the fact that the bad news is that the kid is not going to live that long, but the good news is that Hora can help by offering her like if he's willing to do a contract with her, she can keep him alive for longer. And the thing is that the guy accepts it. So that's basically how the time jackers work. They are all about contracts, which is interesting to note that they do that. I do like the idea behind that. So that's how he becomes this another X8. Now, what does end up happening is that we do end up seeing, and I'm forgetting the exact order of how. No, that's right. So then what happens is that we end up seeing in the present time that M tries to talk to the other X8 and tries to say, like, don't worry, we're going to take care of your son and all this kind of stuff. And the thing is that Tsukuyomi and Sogo end up looking into things having to do with the boy, and they actually find out some important details, which is very much so worth noting. And what happens is that Sogo ends up discussing with the father about how the reason why he's been infecting all these people is because he's been trying to find. He made this game in order to get kids to play it so that he could infect them, so that he could find someone to be an organ donor for his son who has a similar body shape and size, so that way he can save his son. And so this was his tactic, which is a very interesting tactic. It actually makes a lot of sense in how it works, and such a unique one that totally fits the kind of show it is. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. Definitely not what I was expecting at all. But what happens is that he knows that Hiro is like this amazing master surgeon and all that, and he feels like if he can trust Hiro to help out the boy. And the thing is that M really realizes that Sogo really does know what he's talking about. He's not someone that's messing around, and he can actually trust him now. And it's one of the things that's really worth noting, is that there's this sense of trust that he believes in him now, and he doesn't just feel like he's just some guy. There's a genuine sense that he has the knowledge that he needs to have. And so what happens is that eventually the another X8 runs off because he's worried about his son again, and he wants to save his son. But then what happens is that M decides to give Sogo the ride watch for X8, and so he has it, and he said that it was given to me by a friend in the past, and I know that I need to return to its owner. So which tells you right away that more often than not there's something going on there, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, and it gets even more clear towards the end of the episode as to how that whole thing's working, and why he has the X8 ride watch, and why they have ride watches in general. It makes a lot of sense. So anyway, what does end up happening is that Sogo ends up going to the year 2016. He goes in his time machine, and then what happens is that Wool ends up traveling there as well, and Sogo ends up transforming into Geo, and suddenly Time Machine turns into like the robot fighting mode, and so he begins to fight against Wool in his Time Machine, and so they end up going up against each other, which is kind of interesting to watch. And at the same time, we do end up seeing that the another X8 manages to summon some basic like foot soldier enemies that were common in Kamen Rider X8 that end up fighting alongside this another X8. And what happens is that Gaze ends up fighting as well, and we see Gaze, which he uses the his standard form, and X8 does transform into his regular form after eventually Sogo ends up getting involved. And when he gets involved, we see the three of them fighting, and eventually X8 is showing that he can actually deal some real damage and actually hurt the other X8. And the thing that Sogo ends up learning right away is that the only thing that can really do damage to another rider is the power of that rider, or someone using the power of that rider. Meaning only X8 could defeat the another X8, or if Sogo has the X8 ride watch, he can use that to defeat the another rider. if you don't have one or the other, you can't, like, you're just going to be fighting something that can't be defeated. Or at least defeated it completely. I mean, you could defeat it, but it will only temporarily be defeated. You know, in other words, it could just keep on getting up and fighting. But if you have those powers, then you can actually destroy it. And that's the big difference here. So what happens is that, you know, XA tries to fight for a little while. He eventually can't, similar to what happened with Build, where his powers stopped working, and similar to what happened to Cross Z during another Build situation. So in this case, what happens is that Sogo ends up transforming into Kamen Rider GO armor, X8 armor. So he ends up getting the X8 armor, which looks really cool. It actually has like 2 of the Gashots on his shoulder, and he actually has like his standard like hammer weapon that that X8 uses in the show as like the fists, which is kind of interesting. And so we end up seeing that whole look being used in combat, which is really, really cool to watch. And he does do the critical time break, which is pretty cool to see. And he actually says some of the catchphrases and does some of the posing that X8 is known for doing, which was kind of cool to see that. And is really appreciative of seeing all that. And it's kind of nice to see to see him with the rider armor alongside M. And I'm sure it's going to be a common thing throughout all of these, is that they're going to have something similar to this. Because we've already seen it with Build, and we were seeing it now with X8. So it is kind of nice to see that kind of interaction between the rider and the ride armor situation. So we do end up seeing them manage to finish off the another rider. At the same time, Gaze manages to use his powered up Zax to defeat the foot soldiers around him, so all of them get destroyed. And eventually, when the another rider is defeated, in this case it turns back into a normal human. He loses some of his memory of what actually had happened, but what happens is that Sogo ends up detransforming and saying, I'm sure at your facility you can get your master surgeon to help out with helping his son. And M trusts him and agrees. And what happens is that Sogo ends up giving M the regular ride watch that he has, and this ride watch will become the X8 ride watch that he gets Sogo gets in the future. So in other words, it's meant to set things up so that in the future he can get that power, so that things actually occur and they actually make sense when Sogo encounters these riders. So that's the big idea here, is that basically everything that's happening is happening because he's setting himself up for success in a way, which is kind of an interesting thing, because that's what exactly happened with Build and Cross Z. He gave back the ride watches so that in the future they would get them. It's the same idea that will be likely happening throughout the series, so that's kind of interesting to see that. Anyway, that was pretty much it, although in the present time we do end up hearing about something very important, which I forgot to mention, that there is a moment where Sogo ends up arriving in the past, and he ends up going to Gaze, and he says, like, I do trust in you and Tsukuyomi, because like both of them are, you know, wanting to destroy him essentially, but he trusts in them. And in the present time, Sogo's uncle ends up making a lot of food, and then Gaze and Sogo end up discussing things, and like Gaze is kind of interested in why he said what he said about trusting him and Tsukuyomi, and he basically says that I trust both of you to know that if I end up showing that I am becoming like Oma Gio, you will make the right judgment and decide for yourselves whether to take me out or not. And really, he means that, which will likely lead to some pretty serious stuff down the line late into the show. It will probably be something that will be brought up way later on that will be flashback to in future episodes, where most likely he'll show this darker side, and they'll have to decide whether to destroy him or not. And what will happen is that they won't want to. Again, I'm speculating, but I kind of have a feeling that something like that would happen, just because of how they're setting things up and what they're saying. Like, it just seems like if they're not going to do that, then why would they say it? So, you know what I mean? It's one of those situations where I feel like they're setting it up intentionally for those reasons. So that's kind of something that's worth noting. What we do end up seeing is Woes again. Woes is, again, our narrator kind of oracle character again, and he talks about how, he'll be going on another adventure, meeting another legend. In this case, what we do end up seeing is that it's going to be Gentaro from Kamen Rider Forze. So that's pretty cool. Though what's worth noting is that in the trailer, though, we don't see him at all. Gentaro is shown at the end of the episode, but we don't actually see him in the trailer, which is kind of a weird situation, because it's like, if you're going to hint to him being in the future episode, or in like the next 2 episodes, you would imagine if you're going to do it in episode 4, you would have him in the trailer for the next episode, but he's not even shown once in the trailer. We do see other characters from Forze, which is cool. We also see Fies in it, which is really different, and some other characters that are worth noting. So that's going to be a very interesting thing, and we do end up also seeing that Gaze will get to use the build armor, and also it does look like Sogo will be getting the Forze ride armor, which is going to be interesting to look at, and I can't wait to find out how that happens. I am curious, though, because of the fact that Gentaro's shown in one place and then we end up seeing Fies as well. Are they going to have it where he gains both of their armor, or is there some other reason why Fies is even there? Again, I don't really know. What I do suspect that it has to do with is the fact that since typically what we've seen now is that the first episode of each of these takes place in the year 2018, this could just be a 2018 situation, and then when they go to the year 2011, which is what they'll be going to for Forze, that'll be where they actually meet Gentaro. Or maybe Gentaro will show up like briefly at the very, very end of the episode, similar to what happened with M in episode 3, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, if I had to guess, that it makes me think that Gentaro will be showing up in episode 6, or maybe making a brief appearance at the very tail end of episode 5, first before episode 6, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm definitely looking forward to finding out all of that. In the trailer, we do also see another rider Forze, so I'm looking forward to that happening as well. And just in general, these things are looking cool. It is cool to note that Gaze is getting the build armor used, because that means that clearly either he takes the ride watch from Sogo, or they actually are showing a sense of trust with each other, so he's willing to actually give him the ride watch to use in combat, which hopefully that will lead to the same thing happening where Gaze will start giving Sogo the ride watch for Ghost or Drive. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing both of those combinations, and I'm looking forward to Gaze using the X-Aid armor as well. All those things and more are going to be very exciting, and it's great to know that both of them now have 3 ride watches. At least that's what we know of so far. So that's very cool. What is noteworthy is that for some reason this week they actually released the Ryoki ride watch, even though Ryoki isn't being shown in the next episode. So it's kind of weird that they released that, and not something that is actually coming up like a Forze ride watch. Like that would make a lot more sense. And I'm imagining Forze's ride watch will be released in stores for those that are planning on getting it next week or so. So that's something that's worth noting. Otherwise, that's about it for me, guys. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I am Crazy Samurai Sing 1, and goodbye, guys.